Hi all, this is Maria Clark at Willow Designs and welcome to my studio. Today I wanted to do just a quick video on prepping your canvas and some tools that you can use for marking your canvas. So I'm starting off with just a staple back canvas. This is a 10 by 10. You can get these at lots of craft stores. And I use primarily a chalk paint on the background, and you can see that I put it in one of these squeezy bottles. I'll talk a little bit about that more in a minute. The first thing I do is start the back, and I use a couple of different kinds of brushes. This is just a synthetic brush. I start off with the back and do the sides, make sure I've got those corners well done, and set that aside to dry. Here's that shaker bottle I mentioned. I like these. These are Condiment bottles. They have measurements on the side. I can pour my paint in. I'm using a chalk paint, so I always thin it down just a little bit because I find coming out of the jar it's just a little bit too thick and I prefer a little bit thinner. I'm using a 1.5 inch flat brush here for the front. I like this particular brush. I think this is a folk art brush. I like this one because it gives a nice smooth finish. You can see that I don't put a whole lot on and it's fairly thin. So I'll take my brush and just make sure that I get paint all over the front surface there. Get that spread out really well and get it basically covered. And then I'm going to go back. You can see that I'm slowly dragging my brush lightly across the top to smooth that paint out and to make sure that all of the little threads are covered. I go in one direction and then I go in the other direction as evenly as possible. And then I'll go around the edges because there's usually a little bit of buildup on the edge there. And that is going to give me a beautiful finish. To make my grid lines, I'm always in search, like you probably, of the best tools. I use this is a quilting ruler. It's really thin and lightweight. And this is an 18-inch one, and that's a good size for most of the work I do. To start my grid lines, I go corner to corner and then mark the halfway point on each edge of my canvas and connect those dots. And then basically what I've got is 8 grid marks, 8 lines for my basic setup. And often that's enough for me. I sometimes go more, but often I just use this 8 grid. Now this is a great find. This is a little helix compass, and it's a kind of a compass within a compass. And you set it up so that you've got the center point. There's some markings there. And you can see that I'm inserting my pencil at the 1-inch mark, and I just rotate it around to create those circles. And there's various points that you can add the circle to, and then around the outside. So I love this compass. It's so easy to work with. The only issue I have is that it's not big enough, really. It's only, I think, maybe 6 inches, and sometimes I go a bigger canvas, so I would have liked to have a bigger one, but I haven't been able to find one. And in this particular setup, I'm going to actually have 16 grid lines, so you can just see that I'm marking the points around the compass, and it's really nice to be able to have this kind of a compass to make those marks. You can see I had to noodle this a little to figure out where I was at. Don't those lines look great though? And you can see how you can vary the width, the radius of those. Let me get that set back up. I'll put my last 2 marks on. And then I will use my quilting ruler to just connect those lines. And that's going to give me a really nice basic pattern, basic setup for my grids. I often do several of these canvases at one time. It's sort of like a production line because it's messy to get that paint, that background paint. So I just do several of these at a time. And then because I wanted a bigger circle, I'm using a standard compass here, and I didn't really like that too much. So I have this other circle maker, which is actually a fabric cutter, but it goes up to 24 inches. Actually, 12 inches, I think. And you see you can just stick your pencil in there. That's where the blade would run. Just stick your pencil in there, and you can you can make your lines. And that worked out great. And then you just turn it over and do the other side. This one's big enough so that I get lots of, lots of options for how many circles I want to put on the canvas. I did notice that my pencil stuck a little bit there. It's not a very wide gap there, so you have to keep that pencil pretty sharp. But you just go around, connect them up, and you can see that's basically where they connected there. And I could go in with my helix and put a smaller one in the center. So that's basic setup and some of the tools that I've been working with. I'm always on the lookout, so I'll still be looking for some other tools. I know there's some stencils out there that I want to try out. And as I try those out, I'll post a little video so you can see how they work. Hey, thanks all for joining me in the studio today. I hope you enjoyed this, this little tip video on making grid lines and preparing your canvas. Thanks so much for joining me in my studio. Take care.